The water Yahweh, the water Yahweh, the water Yahweh. Call for all Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai, Mashiach. Please give me the increase for this, Lord. He's starting in just a moment here. Finalizing some things. All right, it's going to be a short breakdown or look into Alexander, and you get a bit of my stance on him, my account on him. Getting just a little bit more scripture I didn't prepare just here. All right, here we are. Okay, I'll just save that. So we're just gonna open up with the most known scripture of Alexander here. We're going to start at Maccabees in the Apocrypha. First book of Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, "And it happened after Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. And he made many wars and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over countries and nations and kings, who became tributaries unto him." So that was just real brief, or actually a brief overview of Alexander, but we're going to get into the meat of it. And just to get that, what happened there, that was the prophecy of Daniel chapter 2 and right around 39. And it reads, and this is the prophecy that was given to Daniel when he interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream. "And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth." And that was a prophecy of Alexander. And there's actually another one there as well. But right now, just to get an overlook on him, let's just go over some of some notable things that I noticed that he did. one thing that he did is he restored the Hellenic, I would say Hellenic laws, or the hegemonic leagues laws. That was what that is a coalition of Greek city-states, all combined together to make what you would just call the Greek nation, or the Hellenic people, or the Hellenic league, or the league. And actually, I would have counted the League of Corinth, but many of them refused to join him when he went on his conquest and against King Darius III. And so he gave them back their of all the lands he took back, he gave them back their Greek customs and laws, made them possible to keep that to keep their ways. And let's see where we at. So yeah, and he also defeated King Darius III. And if you look around, normally it will just say Darius, just as in the Bible. It only read Philip, but he was actually the second Philip. He was Philip II. That was the father of Alexander. Let's continue on. During the siege of Halicarnassus of the Achaemenids, the Achaemenids set fire to its stores, and the fires there, it raged, and they said due to the wind that it raged, and much of the city began to burn down. But Alexander, even after the siege, he actually went in there, him and his men, and they put those fires out, and probably spared a lot of people in doing so. So they got, not only were they spared mercy from being pillaged and put to the sword as many times as they happened. That's what the rules of a siege are. If you yield the city and there's no battle necessary, what that normally means is you're supposed to spare the city's citizens, the population. But they didn't do, well, Alexander did, he spared them, he gave them mercy, even though he had to fight for the city. And it happened again at the battle of Issus. I might be pronouncing that wrong, excuse me if I am. And at the battle of Issus, he actually treated the women, or the royal women, with respect. He didn't put them through any madness. And that was actually he quite did that almost every time, it seems like, except for when the battles raged sore. When they were sore battles, there was things got a little messy at times, and we'll be going over that in 1 second. Now let's actually go. I want to do some reading to get the accounts of him. We're gonna go from the Atlas of the Bible, or that's what it's called, right? Atlas, yeah, Atlas of the Bible, and we're just gonna go ahead and we will read over this. It says here, let me see where I want. It's actually quite a lengthy read, but we're going to bear with me. We'll get some understanding here, a little bit about him. It says, Alexander's spectacular rise to power began in 336 BC at the age of 20, when he succeeded to the Macedonian throne upon the assassination of his father, Philip II. So already, we've been confirmed. His father's name is Philip II, King Philip II. He promptly revealed his army skill as he brought the rest of Greek states under Macedonian control. And in 334, he led his army across the Hellespont, and it shows where it's at, but we're not going to go over that. Actually, that's actually where Constantinople is, if you know anything about that region. Determined to drive the Persians out of Asia Minor at Issus, he won a surprising victory against the Persians, host of Darius III. Although his men were outnumbered 3-1, he stood triumphant astride the crossroads of empires. And it says here, for the future, he told, this is a quote, for the future, he told the vanquished Darius, whenever you send to me as the king of Asia. And I thought I quite like that. That's a good spirit to have, to let them know who you're dealing with. Let's continue this. Before continuing his Asian campaign, however, he needed to secure his southern flank, and he put his army on the road to Egypt. So, with this in mind, he's already crossed over into Asia Minor, and he's about to go through the Holy Land, and he's gonna skirt across the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. Hopefully, you can see this. Let's see if I can bring that. You can see this map. First off, it has his. Which one is it? If you look, he goes. All his battles take place predominantly over here on the edge of the sea, of the Mediterranean Sea, and it shows where he crossed just here. But we're going to get further into that. He actually, some things happen in this. It says, to break the Persian naval control of the eastern Mediterranean, he plotted and captured the capture of the enemy's main flank base at Tyre, or Tyre. I've heard it said. So that is actually within. Where is it? Let me just check it out. I think that should be just north. Yeah, north of Samaria on the edge. Let me just see if I can bring that again up to you. Can't really fit it in there. It is, but it's like right here. Let's keep going. It says at Tyre, fortresses Tyre was in fact two cities, and this is actually a notable battle. Some interesting things happen here. It doesn't mention it in this book, but some interesting things did happen. One on the mainland and the other on an island half a mile offshore. While Alexander's military fame rests primarily on his innovative use of powerful infantry, phalanxes, and swift cavalry, Tyre called forth his considerable talents as a military engineer. Lacking the naval strength for an amphibious assault on the island stronghold, Alexander conceived the imaginative notion of constructing a great mole or a causeway to carry his besieging army across the 2,500-foot intervening sea barrier. So what that is it's actually going to go into this. His first operation was to capture the mainland of Tyre and raise the city in order to obtain rubble for the mole. Timber was brought from the forests of Lebanon and quarries established to supply additional stone as the advancing 200-foot wide causeway came within range for the fortress. So they're taking rubble and trees and stones, and they're putting it in the water to make a causeway to get over to the island there, so he can march his army there as well as siege equipment. But let's continue. The defenders opened fire with catapults, raining missiles, molten lead, and red-hot sand on the Macedonians. Undaunted by this fierce resistance, Alexander pressed on. At the last, the causeway was completed. The Macedonians smashed at the stout walls with their great siege catapults and battering rams. To little effect, the siege was now in the 7th month. It took 7 months for this. Alexander had been gathering a fleet of his own and planned a massive combined assault, while his phalanxes and siege artillery attacked from the causeway. Amphibious forces probed for an opening from the flanks. In severe fighting, a breach was finally made in the walls. Utilizing battling ramps in the manner of modern day landing craft, reinforcements poured ashore to exploit the breakthrough. Now, I'm going to continue on, but it's not written here, but you can look it up on your own time. There's actually accounts of what they call flying shields coming into the battle and shooting at, or firing something, I forget the exact description, at the walls, bringing it down so that Alexander and his men could go through. That was of the Lord. But let's continue on. You just check that out on your own time. Landing craft. Reinforcements poured ashore to exploit the breakthrough. Bitter battles filled the streets of Tyre. But the Macedonians soon gained the upper hand, so they went through a sore battle in the streets there. An estimated 8,000 of the defenders were slain, and Alexander had 2,000 captives put to death. The city's remaining population was sold into slavery. Most of the fortress was leveled, ending Tyre's usefulness as a Persian fleet base. So he ended that like that, and hey, that was of the Lord. And otherwise, those flying shields wouldn't have been there. Alexander now advanced southward along the coast. So again, he stayed to the coast for this. Let me see if there's much I should read. So he overrunning Akko and swinging inland straight towards Tower, using cavalry to put down any opposition in the central highlands. So they continued on trying to get over there to Egypt. Let's continue. See what else I want to read. It says, like Tyre, Gaza was formidable because he had to go through Gaza to do this. Was a formidable military obstacle. The high walled fortress was located atop a steep rise, making it invulnerable to the usual siege tactics of advancing towers up the walls, from which the fire down upon the defenders within. So what they used to do, they would use siege towers, and siege towers weren't just used to get like a bridge and whatnot and let it down so that you can get into onto the battlements. Battlements are what we call the walking space of a castle wall. So it wasn't just used for that. There was also a higher part where they would fire down. You're supposed to build your tower higher than the walls themselves so that you can fire down on the men that are on the battlements. So that's what they were doing. Alexander hit upon the idea of creating his own high ground from which to attack. His indefatigable troops were put to work building an immense ramp to carry the siege machinery up to a high level with the fortress. Battering rams and catapults were soon pounding the walls, which were further weakened by diggers undercutting the foundations. And remember when the Lord said that he would teach us war by having us fight the people of the Canaanite lands. When we first came to Israel, that was another tactic that we learned, and we wouldn't put that to use for a long time, but we did. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. At the last, a breach was made, and the Macedonian infantry, using scaling ladders to climb over the rubble, broke into the city to a man. Battus and his troops fell in savage street fighting, and the city was sacked. So it seemed like everything got harder for Alexander. Once he entered the Holy Land, it was time to put the boots on for real. Because, hey, we ain't giving it up easy at all. It was after Gaza fell, according to tradition, that Alexander's journey to Jerusalem to meet with the high priest. Whether this is legend or fact is uncertain. But in any event, Jerusalem was effectively under Alexander's control. Now, I believe this to be true. Just because Alexander did a lot of things in his en route for his conquest, it was the Laiz knot. I forget what it was called. I should have got the exact name. But he went there. It was said to whoever can just go and get the legend. It's the knot. If you can, whoever can untie it will conquer the world. And what he did was, I ain't gonna spoil it for you. Just look it up yourself, and you'll find out it's actually pretty clever. What else is in another one? I'm actually gonna get out of this other book. Pretty sure. Let's see. Make sure I got it. Yeah, I'm gonna get that out of this book here. But just give me one moment, and we'll get over to that. In the late 332, he took all his conquering army into Egypt. Persians gave up their remote outposts of the empire without a fight. And at Siwa, Alexander proclaimed himself Pharaoh by divine right. This is where we get probably where we get that term of Spear One territory, because he was winning most of this by the spear, but these guys just gave it up, man. That's a Hamite for you. Israelites don't normally do that. But it would seem that the high priest did succeed like that. But if you look at these other strongholds that were held under the flag of Darius, this is still Israelite lands. We were still there. And yeah, so we would have had to fight for those things. That's probably why the battles always wax sore for when you fought in the Holy Land. And let's keep going. Alexander proclaimed himself Pharaoh. We got that. He had already personally laid out the site of Alexandria, destined to become one of the great centers of Greek or Hellenistic culture, and indeed one of the great cities of the ancient world. He would eventually found a dozen more cities bearing that name as he pursued his goal of putting the stamp of Greek culture on diverse peoples he was conquering. And that's not all the way true, because we'll go into that in just a moment. At least with that, the bit about him getting people to follow those Greek cultures isn't necessarily true, because, or at least not in the case of Alexander, but the men that came after him, that was definitely true. Now let me go ahead and grab a quick scripture, because he put his names on cities here, so we're going to go ahead and catch them. We ain't going to let them get away. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 49, verse 11. Their inward thought is that their houses shall continue forever in their dwelling places to all the generations. They called their lands after their own names. So this is actually one of the things that they are known to do. Excuse me, pardon me. There, Salakia. Let's continue on. It says, during the conqueror's absence in Egypt, the Samaritans had revolted against their governor in revenge. Alexander ordered the destruction of Samaria. At this time, too, a Macedonian expeditionary force may have penetrated as far as Jericho. Arriving at Tyre, Alexander turned his army northeastward through Syria, marching towards the ends of the earth. So he had to come back and he had to go through Samaria and handle that. Alexander's unprecedented 14,000 mile route of conquest took him as far as India. At Gaugamela, this says on the lower map here, he routed Darius and his hordes, shattering the Persian Empire in Persian power forever. To reinforce that victory, he went on to take Darius' capitals at Babylon, Susa, and Persos Police, where he captured intact the immense Persian treasury and burned Darius' great palace. Now fully possessed by his dream of conquest, Alexander resumes his eastern campaign in 326 in a battle on the banks of Hydaspes. I want to make sure I hit that right. He defeated Philip, perhaps the most skillful foe he ever faced, the Indian king Porus. At last, pressured by his weary army, Alexander the Great ended his odyssey and turned back, having laid claim to most of Asia. It says the extent of Alexander's empire here is shown in yellow. I'll show you that in just a moment. But he would never reach his homeland at Babylon in 323. He took fever and died, is their account. He was only 32 years old. With him died his soaring ambition of world conquest. But now let me show you how far he went. This is Macedonia way over here. This is India. So he took his army pretty far, all from Macedonia over to India, and he took Egypt as well. all straight through the Holy Land. And most notably, he took Babylon. Thank you for that. Go ahead and give them a sore battle. They deserved it for doing what they did to my people. Now, I wanted to get something. Which part was it? He fell ill. Let's go ahead and corroborate that with what's read here in the Bible. We're going to jump back to the book of Maccabees, chapter 1. And we're going to start at 6. Wherefore he called... No, we're going to start a little bit higher than that. It says, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributary unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule, every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them. Many years, and evils were multiplied on the earth. And if you see, those evils didn't really multiply like that until he was gone. And the Diocletian Wars, or the Wars of Secession, kicked off. And that's when the evils started to multiply on the earth. And we'll probably get into that, but I'm not quite sure when I'll be able to get into that bit, but we will. One moment. And actually, let's get that, those evils that multiply. Despite the century of relative prosperity, it says under Ptolemaic rule, pro-Seleucid sentiment had remained strong amongst the Jews of Jerusalem. But I've read that it actually wasn't under them where they found that prosperity. They found it under Alexander's wife is where they found it, because she took away the tribute. They were paying tribute onto Macedonia. She took that away, and then she helped them to get their farm stuff to get back together. And notably, he wasn't out there salting fields like Rome did. There was a bit more that I wanted to get on him, I thought. Yeah, let's go into... That was the Atlas of the Bible. Let's go into Zealot. Is that what I want to go into first? Hellenistic age is there. Salakio, let me just one moment. All right, here we go. This part here collaborates what I was saying about what I was about to say when they said that he was placing people under Greek customs and whatnot. That's false. Alexander didn't do that. But let's go ahead and read this here. This is the book called Zealot. Under this chapter is A Hole in the Corner is what is titled. Under page 12, I start reading from where it starts to say the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire and Jerusalem with it fell to the armies of Alexander the Great, whose descendants imbued the city and its inhabitants with Greek cultures and ideas. Upon Alexander's untimely demise, Jerusalem was passed as spoils to the Ptolemaic dynasty and ruled from distant Egypt, though only briefly. In 198 BC, the city was wrested from Ptolemaic control by the Seleucid king Antiochus. He calls him the Great, but whatever. Whose son Antiochus Epiphanes fancied himself a god incarnate and strove to put an end once and for all to the worship of the Jewish deity in Jerusalem, or the Jew or the Israelite deity in Jerusalem. So again, this didn't happen under Alexander. This happened under, not, I wouldn't even say they like to say his, what do they just call it? His descendants. It wasn't his descendants. It was some of his men, which are actually pretty wicked, but we'll get into that. Hey, that's a story for another day. But the Jews responded to this blasphemy with relentless guerrilla war led by the south-hearted sons of Mattathias the Hasmonean, the Maccabees, who reclaimed the holy city from Seleucid control in 164 BC, and for the first time in 4th century restored, it says Jewish here, but I say Israelite hegemony over Judea. So that's that. I'm going to leave that right there. I'm going to leave that there. And we're going to reach from a different book, which I want you to buy for myself. It's called The Hellenistic Age by Peter Green. But with my way of life right now, that's not a liberty I have. Let's see where I was going to start at, pulling from this book to strengthen my view on Alexander here. We're going to go to page 4, and we're going to read a paragraph just there. And actually, you know what? Before we start that, I want to go read on page 7 to strengthen the reason why I do believe that he stopped by Jerusalem to see the high priest. It's because he stopped at that Not place, and then he stops another place at Delphi. Where is it at? First new paragraph. It says, Alexander did rather better at Delphi, which he visited on his way back from Corinth and Peia. By now, it was late November, mid-November to February. The shrine was closed on religious grounds, no exceptions. Alexander, who put great faith in oracles and badly wanted one for his Persian crusade, seized the Pythia bodily and began dragging her to the inner sanctum. Young man, exclaimed the quick-witted priestess, you are invincible. Alexander promptly released her, saying this was good enough prophecy for him, and therefore assumed Eniketros as one of his regular titles. So if he was wanted to speak with what do they call them? Obviously, I'll just use a prophetess or oracle in Delphi. Hey, the best or the only people who can tell you prophesy best is the prophets. And where do you find prophets in that time? You're gonna find them in the holy name under Israel. Verily, Yasharallah. We're the ones who prophesy the best. We tell you exactly what's going on. So that's that. That's the reason why I'm pretty sure he did stop by to see the high priest. But now let's go again. We're gonna go to page 4. And I should have actually gave you guys it's actually it's Alexander and his legacy is the chapter name right here. So it's the bottom line. Let's read it. It says, so literally at the 11th hour, hold on one moment. Just one moment. Actually, yeah, it's right here, actually. So this is actually we're gonna go into a little bit of the way Alexander was. So he was actually led by his mother quite a bit, but I don't believe him to be a kinslayer. I don't think he was responsible for his father's death, for that assassination. And when we read this, hopefully you'll get a bit of an understanding where I would say that. What then were his underlying motives? The wedding feast this is talking about Philip, simply underlined their apparent lunacy. Everyone got drunk. Attalus proposed a toast, a prayer for Philip and Cleopatra to produce a legitimate heir. That was a slight at Alexander. I'm sure that pissed him off. Alexander is understandably furious is what I would say. Are you calling us, note the royal we, a bastard? assaulted Attalus. Go in and lay hands on that man. Philip made to attack not Attalus, but his own son. Drunk, he stumbled and collapsed on the floor, giving Alexander a famous exile line. That's the man who's going to cross from Europe to Asia, and he can't even make it from one couch to the next. The insulted prince, heir apparent, no longer apparently no longer got his mother away to Epirus, and himself took refuge among the Illyrians. Both predictably proceeded to stir up frontier trouble. So they were calling him a bastard, and he's heir to the Macedonian throne. So that would have made me furious too. Why, with a major campaign ahead of him, should so canny a diplomat as Philip have invited palace mayhem by trashing the long-established royal succession overnight? If we assume that he had not taken leave of his senses but was acting on a rational basis, there is one motive only that can explain his sudden volte-face and fall of 338 BC. The conviction that Alexander and Olympias, that's Alexander's mother, were planning his overthrow, argued history made such a fear look all too plausible. If this was what Philip believed, his actions make good sense. In hindsight, of course, they can only be seen as not ruthless enough. Was his belief justified? On this, certainty is impossible, but it is not hard to see how such suspicions could have been aroused. Alexander's entire upbringing, especially when assessed in light of his mother's inordinate ambitions for him, suggest a pattern of high aims, even higher hubris, and dangerous royal impatience. So he's saying they're insisting that he was impatient because he has to be the head of his country, of his nation, because he has high aims and even higher hubris. And I believe that he probably did have high aims and visions, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you ought to be patient, as I should be patient in my aims. So I'm learning from Alexander. It is how a king. How best can a king learn? From the prophets first, but from other kings second. You should definitely be looking at that. Let's continue reading. This is actually next bit is gonna go into a bit of his personality, of where he's getting his a bit of his personality from. The boy was encouraged to think of himself as a new Achilles, from whom his mother's family claimed descent. Wonder where he's getting that from. Which isn't all that bad, because Alexander was a warrior king, and he led his army and his cavalry himself. His Homeric ideals was to be a good king and a strong spear fighter. So, and let's continue reading before I stop. And perhaps more important, ever to strive to be best and outstanding above all others. So if you're going to be a good king and a strong spear fighter and ever strive to be best and outstanding above all others, you're probably not going to murder your father in cold blood. Glory and fame, Cleos, were to be won by conquest, not by putting your father down. So I doubt that. But Philip again and again seemed to be anticipating him. For me, Alexander told his tight-knit circle of friends, he will leave no great or brilliant achievements to be displayed to the world with your aid. What use are possessions to me if I achieve nothing? So Alexander, he didn't like money. Well, let's just say possessions, because there's more than just gold for possessions. You have cattle, land, or I should say livestock, lands, and other things. If I achieve nothing, I'm going to read that again. What use are possessions to me if I achieve nothing? And I live by this same code. Worst of all, it was not Philip, not he who stood ready to invade Asia, the great venture that Alexander had thought of as his own inheritance ever since childhood seemed, like Achilles' prize about to elude him. So he wanted to do this. This was one of his ambitions, to beat back the Persians, Medes, who were under Darius, who they had conquered much of Greece, and pushed them back. He wanted, well, not just him, it was also his father's dream to do this too. If he and his mother were in fact planning a coup, now was the time, and his motivations could hardly have been stronger. But Philip was gearing up to do this anyways. But that's a story for another day. Hopefully I'll be able to get into that and break that down for you. So, one moment, let's see if we're going to read any more right here. I'm going to read this last paragraph right here. So literally at the 11th hour, Alexander of Macedonia, now King Alexander III, came into the full inheritance of which he and his mother had dreamed, because his father was assassinated. For so long, like his father, he assumed power in dangerous circumstances, a baptism of fire. He was young, relatively unknown, and not yet hallowed with the extraordinary aura of charisma and achievement that in a few short years would come to define him. His powerful opponents may well have thought they could dispose of this upstart boy without trouble. They were wrong. He showed himself absolutely ruthless from the start, and had good reason to be. He knew that both his cousins, these Greek names, Amyntas and Cleopatra's newborn son, Caranus, named ostensibly after the dynasty's mythical founder, represented a direct threat to his rule and had powerful backers. They were calling him a bastard, so it was time that he had to do something about that. Let's see. So what he had to do was to finance his wars. He also he tried to get the Hellenistic League to support him, but they didn't do that. They started off to do that, but then they backpedaled. At least I can say that the Spartans were straight up with them. Let's see. I'm actually bring that out. The Spartans, the Lacedaemonians, who I know to be Israelites, were straight up with them. Let's see where he at. Can I find that? Where was it? I didn't prepare to read this one, but he indeed did not. The Lacedaemonians, or the Spartans, refused to join them, but it was on grounds that they cannot serve under another king. They can't submit themselves to another king. He probably would have stood next to you, Alexander, but they weren't about to submit themselves to under another king. Like, let's see, what else did I want to get? Let's strengthen that fact that Alexander was not moved by money. I'm going to go to the bottom paragraph under the chapter titled Alexander and His Legacy on page 16. What all this meant was the expedition was fundamentally disruptive rather than constructive in any unifying sense. It began with a urgent need for booty and ended in megalomania. It took over an empire that had lasted for 2 centuries, shattered its theocratic rationale, patched a Macedonian superstructure onto its administrative systems, treated its accumulated wealth in fairy gold to be poured out at will, and looked no further than the grandiose personal ambitions of its leaders. Isocrates and other pan-Hellenists had repeatedly stressed the wealth and weakness of Persia as good reason for invasion. The Macedonians took the hint and went all out for the for the fabulous loot, to which Alexander himself was largely indifferent. It didn't matter to him. Let's keep reading. Except when he needed to buy himself out of difficult situations by means of massive bribes, as so often with his exhausted and resentful troops. So it was his troops that he was always, look, when they always buck up, they get tired of doing things. Look, man, here, take this money. Let's keep it going. The treasuries of Susa, Persepolis, and Ecbatana made him the wealthiest man in the known world. Delusions of grandeur followed, and his amazing string of brilliant military successes, played up even further by court flattery, gave him the conviction that his deeds had eclipsed those of his ancestor Heracles. Notions of Godhead were not slow to follow. One moment, let's see if I want to get any more from over here. So, the point is that money doesn't really motivate Alexander, and let's just go ahead and let's grab that quote again. It was the conquest. He was more concerned of legacy. Which is his name, making a name for himself, legacy, and I'm all for that. Where we at? Let's grab that quote again. Oh, here it is. What use are possessions to me if I achieve nothing? So that is what's important right there, is your achievements, that legacy, that name that you got. That is what is important, not your purse. But money, you can use money as a defense, which Alexander did. He did master that. I give him that. So Alexander was not motivated by greed or green or gold. Let us continue. We're going to go to page 50. Another thing about him, hey, his head started getting pretty big. Well, you know what? Hey, people get this. Hey, that's a common problem. I had this problem a little bit too, and Lord forgive me. Says, the bottom paragraph of the line. I'm going to the line here. It says, among the more notorious Alexander's actions during the last few months of his life was his demand to be worshipped as a god. In fact, the idea was not new and appealed to the wider range of the public at large, then educated reactions to it. Hold on. Which of course are all we have, might suggest. Offerings to notable figures as on a par with the gods were not uncommon. Philip II, a shrewd political psychologist, had taken the notion to its logical conclusion by having his image borne in procession with those of the Olympian pantheon, while his son's pursuit of Homeric glory, in the opinion of many, went further still. by, it says, excelling the record achievements of excelling the recorded achievements of Heracles and Dionysus. But even one of his I think it was in the Bible in the Bible Atlas of the Bible I just brought out there. Who was it? Antiochus or something like that. I think it was Antiochus that tried to get make the Israelites and other men and Greeks worship him as a god. And in the end, that didn't go. Hey, the Lord catches up with you. That's all I'm gonna say. Let's see. Is there any more I wanted to bring out of him right now? The strength in what I think of him. So he was definitely going off right there, you know. He definitely was. Let's talk about the social impact. So about his what happened with why I said that. This is why I said that, or part of why I said that Alexander wasn't responsible for the Israelites going off into Greek customs and things like that. In fact, we're gonna do something. We're gonna read this, and then I'm gonna read something else, and that'll probably be our final scripture. It says, when we consider the social impact produced. Oh, one more. I need to read. This is on page 56. Kings, cities, or the chapter entitled Kings, Cities, and Culture. It says, when we consider the social impact produced on the inhabited world by all these far-reaching changes, the first and most obvious conclusion is that it made an enormous difference who you were precisely. That is, under what kind of regime you live. Most of the indigenous people of Asia in Egypt, it says, fell Helen, cared very little who, many hundreds of miles away, was their new overlord. They simply wanted to be left alone to get on with their lives. Even the Jews were glad enough to cooperate with any Seleucid government that respected their stringent religious requirements. So as long as the Israelites will allow to keep our faith in our laws, in the ways of our forefathers, hey, they didn't really care. Hey, if we got to pay not tithes, what do they call it? The tributary. They had to pay tribute to you. Hey, so be it. You know, we got to deal with it. But we want to keep our laws and our way of life. The Greek merchant soldiers or fortune and other adventurers who flocked to Egypt and Asia Minor under the Macedonian umbrella shared their master's appetite for rich pickings, which that's actually not Alexander's appetite. You're talking about other men like let me read. Who other men got this kind of? Cassander, Demetrius, Lysimachus, Antipater. These are their qualities. Most interesting and not surprisingly best documented are the reactions of educated Greeks, both those who made careers as writers, scholars, and or administrators at the courts of rulers such as Ptolemy II or Antigonus, and those who chose to remain in one of the old city-states, Athens. Above all, where lack of ultimate political freedom was offset for those with the incomes and connections by numerous new luxuries and civic amenities. It might be supposed that Athens, nostalgic for the lost glories of the 5th century's art and the spoils of empire, would differ sharply in their attitudes from the poets and scholars gathered by the early Ptolemies to staff the great new Alexandria Museum and Library. See, Alexander, he established this, the museum and library that was in Alexander. He was the one that laid out the plans for these things in the city. One moment, or Salakia. I'm just going to keep reading. But at least in one respect, they take on their heritage was identical. Both look to the past as the only viable basis from which to face the future. And that's the same thing we do as Israelites. Hey, we says look to the ways of old. I brought that scripture out many a times, and walk therein. But you say that you will not walk therein. Excuse me. And this, oddly, they resemble Alexander's, whose quest for the world's ends, far from being treated as pioneering exploration, always affected to be followed in the footsteps of mythical predecessors. First Heracles, and then in India, Dionysus. So again, he was motivated by conquest, a legacy. The major preparatory task of the library's academic staff, a task never, in fact, totally completed, and one that continued long after the Renaissance, was the retrieval of classification and editing of what we now term the archaic and classical literary heritage, from Homer to the great tragedians. I'm not familiar with what that is, tragedians. I should have looked into that. A high proportion of which had been generated in Athens. As a result, for us, the social impact of Alexander and his successors is despite epigraphic, archaeological, and numismatic evidence, inextricably bound up with the literary record. To this abstinent trend, we largely owe the ultimate survival of that small percentage of ancient Greek literature that we possess today. And actually, it was written in here that we're just about there, so I'm just going to read the rest of this. What gave the obsession such force is harder to explain. One possible answer is the absence often remarked on of any body of scripture that could be appealed to for moral precedent. So they lacked moral precedent in a literary format. And if Homer was treated as the Bible of the Greeks, it was I'm not sure what this Faut de Meux, it's a Greek thing or something like that. Hence to the extraordinary spread of ethical theories among rival philosophical creeds. Yet it is also hard to escape the impression, unpopular among classes today, of a widespread ancient belief that with the close of the classical era, a sense of creative direction and purpose was lost. That try as they might, the Greeks never quite succeeded in recovering. And let's see what happened here. Nor should we forget that the new Greek immigrants, that the new Greek immigrants, which a lot of them were actually Israelites, and that's why you find in the New Testaments you find Israelites mad at Greeks for calling them Gentiles, wondering why they're keeping the way and accusing them of keeping the ways of the Greeks. Let's continue. That the new Greek immigrants of Alexandria in particular had like the Alexandrian Jews who translated the Pentateuch, been cut off from their ethnic roots. So again, there was forget that the new Greek immigrants, skip down a little bit, like the Alexandrian Jews. And what did these Jews do? They translated something for the Greeks. But what happened? They had been cut off from their ethnic roots. And so that's something to note there. The Jews in Alexandria were translating things for the Greeks and had been cut off from their ethnic roots. I can only assume that they were cut off from that under Antiochus, because Alexander had no hand in that. And what else did I want to say? Or they willingly went off into the ways of the heathen. And that's hey, so that's just that. And it shows here that they lacked that moral compass in a literal format, because the tales of Homer don't give you that. They give you, hey man, they give you some other madness. So with that in mind, let's also talk about Alexander one moment. Again, Alexander, his soldiers mutinied him, and it wasn't only they didn't only attempt to mutiny because they were being drugged to the ends of the world, which is I'm sure that might have been stressful, but they also were upset with him because he started picking up Greek customs and living in a not a Greek part, that I spoke that wrong, Persian customs, and living in a Persian way. And now let me go ahead and rebuke the Israelites, because we had a chance. We could have taught him better. And how would we have taught him better? Through our walk. Let's get it. We're going to start at verse 4. It's going to be Deuteronomy. Actually, we're going to start at verse 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 4. But ye that did cleave unto the Lord your God are alive, every one of you this day. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgment, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, speaking of the commandments, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes. And what would happen if we were acting right? It says, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who have Yahweh so nigh unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for? So had the Alexander had seen that, mayhaps he would have hearkened on to our way. And as it says, out of Israel shall go forth the law. And so that they would have seen what the law of the world is, and he probably wouldn't have been hearkening on to that Persian way. So hey, with that, that's my stance on Alexander. I still got some more things to speak to go in about him. I'm probably going to be a slight rebuke, and so that's that. And with that, I'm going to say, Call Halal Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai Hamashiach. Double honors to the apostles and the prophets that came before me. Salutations to the Aqua and Akim that are in this truth, and especially to those out there in the highways and byways teaching this truth and in sincerity. Shalom.